Well, hey, everyone, I'd like to welcome you all to our January meeting. We have the distinct honor of having Jeffrey Senske. Honestly, his name alone should be enough. Everybody, I'm certain, has seen his scapes. I know that this is a lot of people's first meeting. I want to welcome you all to the Greater Houston Aquarium Club. This is kind of our odd family, and we enjoy doing it. I want to thank Don and Josh and Mike and Lewis and everybody here at Aquarium Design Group who made all this happen. Give them a big round of applause. And yeah, I know that they brought in a lot of cool Nano stuff. Nanos can be a challenging tank, especially with such a small space. You know, making it kind of work inside of character and controlling that can be a real challenge. It looks real easy. It is probably one of the more difficult aquariums to do successfully. And I'm really excited to hear Jeff's interpretation and his vision on that. I know that he's gathering up the last of his supplies. Do you have anything, James?
No, not right now.
No? I know that Lewis was here. You guys don't know Lewis Navarro. He'll be racing in the marathon tomorrow, so everybody give him a big shout out. And yeah, we're really excited. I know that the Nano contest will be working. We're kind of working it, so we'll be getting those details up as soon as we can. But all right, hey, Mr. Lewis, good luck tomorrow.
Thank you, sir.
I know you're going to win it. We're going to have an aquascaper at the front.
There you go.
I thought we were a little bit closer to Jeff being here. He's probably gathering up the last bit of his supplies. Honestly, I think one of the things that I've always been fascinated with nanos, it's such a small space that you've got to make smart choices. Kind of when you have that vision, it's making those selections and going, I want West Africa, I want, because you can quickly become confused if your vision isn't, kind of focused. Honestly, so if you haven't looked, I would definitely recommend doing a nice Google image search of Jeffrey Senske online, and just the amount of work that both him and Mike have done in the aqua design or aqua design mono, kind of that nature style scape. It is in a phenomenal amount of work. It's just really, really a delight to have him here in Houston and presenting to our club. I believe he'll be using some of the UN tanks. They're just gorgeous. We're loving the mitered edges on these. I don't know if you've noticed it, but all of the glass seams, instead of it being butted, so normally in a tank they're butted, they're actually mitered on a 45, you can see.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
That's attention to detail right there, craftsmanship.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we will. That's the constant.
you, everyone. Thanks for coming out. Really appreciate it. Welcome to Aquarium Design Group and the Aquarium Design Store. And today's presentation is on the very popular category of nano tank aquascaping. I've never really known exactly what the parameters are on what's considered a nano tank. For me, I guess it's about like the 10 gallons and under range. So I'm sure there's a little bit of subjectivity in there, but that's generally when I think of a nano, I'm thinking of like sub 10 gallon. So, you know, it's a popular category, and we sell a lot of these little tanks. I would say I think there's a notion that, you know, maybe because it's smaller, it's easier. That's kind of a thing that's been around the aquarium hobby for a long time. I'm going to have to say I'm not entirely sure that that's totally true. I would say it's easier to find good hardscape materials that are, you know, scaled towards smaller things, and it's certainly more affordable. But definitely, nano tank, you know, has its own, brings its own unique challenges. For me, it's more so after the fact. Lots of little things, water parameters, lighting even is a thing I've kind of found recently. A lot of the lights are a little, you know, they're trying to have it be something you can plug in and turn on and turn off to, I presume, keep the cost down. And a lot of times the light on such a little tank is really very robust, and that brings with it a whole, you know, it's an aspect of some of the challenges that I see sometimes is not exactly talked about all that often. And there's the assumption, well, this is an awesome, sleek light that was clearly made to fit exactly on the tank. It's going to grow everything. And while there is some truth to that, with LEDs especially, we're finding that it can be a little too much light for a lot of the popular plants happening right now, like Ricardia or Mini Pellia, for example. Not that it won't grow in bright light, but we're definitely seeing it doing kind of what we would think of as better and more subdued lighting. So, you know, same light, taller tank, etc., starts to become more appropriate. Sometimes filters for little tanks can still be a little bit elusive. Nothing wrong with a hang on the back, just sometimes when we're into the rimless style, we're sort of wanted to keep the clean look going, and it's not long before our filter setup is costing more than the whole rest of the system, right? But beyond that, or on the filter note, I would add, and it's new to me also, is these, there's a couple different brands of them out now, but the little surface skimmer filters have really been a game changer, and I was shocked to find them being used as the sole filter on, I'm seeing them up to like a 60 centimeter, nearly 20 gallon tank. Probably doing more frequent water changes, but there's nothing but one of the little Eheim surface skimmer filters on there. So clearly the surface skimming aspect of that is opening up that possibility. It's maybe moving just enough water around. Maybe if you had two of them, this is still a pretty low cost filter sort of idea that's especially if we're in what I'm thinking of as a true nano category, that I find them to be totally appropriate, surprisingly so, actually. And it's so nice having that surface be skimmed all the time, just the whole, you know, maintaining that top view without aeration or needing to have a pipe that we can lift up and this whole thing. So that is a really something fairly new that I would freely run one of those on either of these tanks for sure. So anyway, this one I kind of started to mock up a little bit. I might take that out and just kind of show you the ease with which good pieces of wood can just really come together. This is, when I'm thinking a nano tank, what's been historically called a mini M, this was a kind of a model name coined by ADA, is really, I think, sort of the quintessential sort of nano planted tank. It's just big enough to kind of be able to get your hands in there and work. It's not so tiny that everything you find is a little too big to go in there, that sort of thing. This particular one and the line that we're carrying exclusively now is from Ultim Nature Systems, and I just want to take a quick second to really give a nod and a lot of appreciation and gratitude and just a big shout out to the Ultim guys, which you will also find them selling plants at looseplant.com. These guys are really taking some really big chances in the U.S. market, and we now have a U.S.-based company bringing us a really high-quality rimless tank and bringing in some excellent plants that have been historically a little tricky, a little elusive. I won't go off on my plant. U.S. plants rant problem, all this whole thing with you today, but plants have been a real challenge, at least at the level of aquascaping, as opposed to what I lovingly refer to as a fish tank with plants in it. It's sort of a different matter. When I think of aquascaping, it's really, we're trying to make a sort of a composition, a design, an underwater scene, something with a philosophy. And then the fish, not always, but often, are a little bit more of a sort of the punctuation mark or the icing or the final touch that's going to complement the scene that we've made. Doesn't mean an aquascape tank can't be based on a particular fish that you want to keep. By all means, it can. That can certainly be the source of inspiration. But clearly, there's a little bigger picture thing than I've made a fish tank, and you're supposed to have some plants in there, and so I'm going to put some plants in there, and some's going to get some fuzzy stuff on them, and some's going to grow, and some's not. All of which is totally fine. Again, in an aquascape, we're really trying to kind of create a composition, bring that composition into form. So, on that note, just before I start actually putting something in this tank, something that I always encourage everybody in any kind of aquascaping context to almost maybe have just a little moment of kind of orienting yourself before you start on a tank. And maybe this orienting started when you go first conceiving of the tank, and this can be it can be hours, it can be days, it can be weeks, it can be months. Hopefully it's not years, but orienting yourself to establishing a philosophy for your layout. And by that, I mean some sense of where you're going with it, and beyond that, maybe what kind of feeling you're looking to evoke. Maybe, and it's completely fine to have referenced the vast wealth of images and videos on the internet these days to kind of find those things that inspire you. And when I say philosophy, though, really, it's not as simple, but in the macro sense, just to kind of understand this concept, we could think of the difference between a tank with lots of stem plants, red plants, and bright greens, and bright, high-energy, fast-growing, high-energy aquarium, versus, on the opposite end of the extreme, lots of shade plants, a little more highlight and shadow contrast, what we might think of as lower light plants. The feeling or the vibe of a cryptocarine, for example, is different from a bright red Ludwigia or a really intense Rotala, stem plant. And so that's the two kind of easy to understand kind of macro picture extremes when I say philosophy, sort of where am I going? And that can obviously be a mix, of course, but it's one of the biggest things I just consistently see when people come in to just kind of getting into aquascaping. Often they are starting with a smaller tank. And it's just a little more fine-tuned orientation to what you want to do, the little scene that you want to make. Because I think what's attracting people to the aquascaping style as opposed to having a fish tank with some plants in it, which again is completely fine. I'm not saying that's a bad or wrong way. I'm just saying when we say aquascaping, what's attracting them is that thing that they're seeing that seems like an intangible, or like it's almost, you've made a little underwater world there. There's a little scene, there's a composition, there's like the parts all fit together, this kind of thing. And all that is, I'm telling you, is just having a little bit of orientation of kind of where you want to go and what you want to do from the start, and then kind of building your materials from there. So when I do these kinds of things, I like to keep it very sort of improvisational and kind of random when I'm grabbing the materials, because I mean, here I was kind of looking for some scale, and I thought, well, if I get long-winded, which I have a tendency to do, then I had some orientation already here. If there's time, I would take it out and throw it back in there and kind of just show you how good pieces of wood, I've tried to make it look like one here, but how good pieces of wood can come together so easy, and it sort of can pay to invest in a great hardscape. But trying to work a little bit more like, and I mean it with a lot of appreciation, but like how a customer would have to work. Because clearly, I'm in a bubble here, working all day with pallets and so much material, and I could sit around and just do this mock-ups all day and just get everything so perfect. In reality, there's seldom time for that, but it's sort of a unfair advantage, I think. So sometimes I just like to kind of grab something really quick that I think is going to work, and then show, again, I think because it speaks to the power of how good materials almost sort of orient themselves, and that's a very pleasing thing when you just set it in there. Oh, okay, wow, that's kind of awesome. Let me just be done. Okay, not always that easy, but certainly using the mock-up box back there and these kinds of things, I think, can really help get you a solid set and just a solid direction from the get-go. So I don't need the light, but I can certainly turn it on if it's sort of easier to see. I don't know if it's a little too bright or sort of that's somewhat helpful. Yeah, better? Okay, cool.
Super bright.
Yeah. So try not to digress too far on this, but it's a theme you'll be seeing here in the gallery more and more. And I would just put it like this. It's just kind of where I'm at right now is really into the epiphytes, the attached plants. There's a few reasons for that. The number one reason, though, is that most of them are simply easier to grow, number one. Secondly, they allow us to do something. I'm actually trying to get this term to maybe catch on, where we're able to put more emphasis on the hardscape, and then because we're dealing with mostly attached plants, we don't necessarily need. In fact, I've been seeking to skip the use of a substrate, or something where I'm going to plant plants in the substrate. There's another whole, gosh, if we could just have a seminar on this thing, we could explore all these topics, but really, right now, it's, to me, there's a vague inconsistency between the different soils and kind of what's going on out there. The market's gotten really crowded. It used to just be the ADA aqua soil, that was it, that's what you used. If it wasn't that, it was fluoride or an inert type of substrate. So now all different soils, different availability, different distribution. Some companies just sticking their pinky toe in the U.S. market. They're a big deal in Europe and Asia. but it's kind of hard to get here. You heard it was good on the internet, now you're looking for a lot of frustrations I'm finding there, and some performance. I don't want to call it an inconsistency, but each one of these soils I'm finding kind of has their own particular thing, their own recipe, if you will, and that results in something that's difficult to scale. In other words, people are coming in, so what they want the aqua soil. Well, I'm not carrying that currently for X, Y, and Z reason. Here's what I am carrying, and there's a whole process there that goes with explaining how we would use one differently from the other. And this is another topic that, again, it's not a lot of talk out there, and not too much chatter on this topic, but as somebody who's sort of entrenched in this thing, in the U.S. market anyway, I'm in a little bit more of a unique situation with limited availability, but lots of volume, lots of opportunities to try things. So being still a little on the fence as far as the soil that I'm like, yes, this is just doing everything I want to with ease. I've really kind of fallen in love with these, with an aquascaping style. I'm calling it not so much a planting, but a greening. Because we're not really planting anything anymore. Then when I think of planting, I'm sort of putting something in the soil, something is going to put roots down and grow up. Something in the substrate is like a planting. The direction we're going more and more is, again, something as like, this is more of a greening of a hardscape. And the reason that's exciting is because we've actually been able to get really good hardscape materials, and we've invested heavily in that. Hopefully that shows back there. And I'm finding, okay, it's a heck of a lot easier, especially at the smaller tank size, to keep a piece of wood and a rock in an aquarium than it is to be dealing with all this different species and trimming and growing. And so it's a wonderful entree into something a little more in the high-tech realm. We got a little CO2 in there. We got good lighting. The core formula is very similar as far as your system, but in the absence of a soil substrate, we're able to, stock the tank with fish much faster, which is always fun. And most of these attached plants, as we all know, are just simply easier to grow and kind of work with, what we've historically called the shade plants and this sort of thing. So with more emphasis on good hardscape materials, now we can make a really amazing structure and kind of bring in the green. And it's something I'm finding is a much more accessible to a lot more people. So the other cool thing is different sands, gravel substrates. We often are using even a pool filter sand, which is really nice. It's very expensive and very clean. Wow, we can really start to expand the palette of, now I do find myself defaulting to the white sand quite a lot, but there's a lot of opportunities with different sands, different gravels, mixing and texturizing different ones, this kind of thing. And there's none of this making a little border and there's a substrate in the back and the sand in the front and the substrate's always kind of spilling into it and all the rest of it. And laying down the substrate in a tank can be as simple as doing a little number like this, with something that probably just cost, maybe $3 worth of sand, if that. I mean, this is just pulling it from if you bought the whole bag, is maybe $19.99, but you would have enough sand for 16 of these tanks now, right? So generally, too, I'm sort of partial to a fairly thin cover with the finer sands. There's not any great reason for depth. We're really just trying to cover the bottom glass. And already there's just sort of a sense of, let's just put it this way, one less thing to manage, because a lot of the soils come with their own sort of backstory in terms of getting the tank going and all the rest of it. So because I'm going to do some stones, actually, it just occurred to me, go a little deeper, just because that little extra sand can provide some support for the stones as you start to get them in there. Now sometimes too, I lay it out with no sand, just on the glass, and then I'm coming around it with the sand is another way to do it. A little heavier handed with the stones here. I know those are going to kind of want a little support there, and then very more than likely it'll sort of be touched up at the end. This morning I kind of put through some materials in this 90-gallon tank here in the middle, and just did it all on the glass. It still needs a few rocks and touches, but then I just came around that with the sand. Purely cosmetic, purely just to cover the bottom glass. So here I'm working with a fresh batch of what's being called Frodo stone, which we just cracked open the pallet today, and we do have this for sale. We have some in the front, but the really good stuff is in the back. It doesn't come cheap, unfortunately. If there was another way, I wish it was $2 a pound, but alas, it is quite an ordeal, quite a story. I'd be happy to share on the side about sort of how this rock even comes to be available to us here. It's really cool, and this was all acquired through my really good friend Adam in Poland. You may have seen the ADA Idea Studio. He's an ADA distributor for Poland, and a wonderful friend and an amazing aquascaper, and just absolutely love Adam, and he's really doing the hobby a service, providing the stone, but to get a big pallet of rocks all the way from Poland to here is not an inexpensive endeavor. So try to get out of the way quickly. I mean, I haven't done anything formal with these rocks yet, but what I can tell you I was looking for straight out, and some of this stuff, quite frankly, is more beneficial, in my view, than watching someone stand up here fussing and doting over arranging stones in an aquarium. I'm going to do that too, but some of these points to me are the actual practical things that I find people can take with them when they're putting together their own scapes, not just watching me with a warehouse full of stuff. Yeah, it's easy with a whole warehouse full of stuff, Jeff, this thing, right? So what I'm kind of looking for, though, is families or similar characteristics, or something between the rocks that seems to want to orient them together. Because within the same rock, and you've probably seen this if you rummage through the bins back there, same rock, same price, but there might be 3 or 4 different kind of traits. You'll start to see different patterns and characteristics emerge. And so they may be two the same kind of rock, but they're very different. And if you put them together, they don't look right together. There's something about the shape or the texture, this kind of thing. So in this case, I had the advantage of actually traveling to Poland and actually getting able to pull my own rocks that would be shipped to me. And I even went through, and every single stone was marked with a pink chalk. This was dubbed Operation Pink Chalk, by the way. So what I was doing there was I'm looking at all this stone, same origin, but I'm seeing all this different characteristics, some of it radically different from the other. And I was trying to kind of orient things into groups and the things that went together. It's all shipped together and now needs to be sorted in this way yet again. But even in the kind of a macro sense, I'm looking for relationships. There might be one really amazing stone, but it didn't really have any family members, any friends, anybody that looked like they complemented it. So if there's a number one thing to kind of getting a scape to look like the cool one you saw on the internet, I think it's this thing where you're looking for the right relationships. So now on this stones only style, it's pretty traditional to start with the biggest stone. You don't have to. There's not any rules about these things, but it does kind of help you get a sense of where it's going, kind of orienting. Sometimes it's like, this looks like it's going to be pretty cool, but yeah. I was afraid it might be a little too big. We'll see where it goes. I'm not completely sold on that. Now, right away, I wanted to set it down this way. And the reason for that initially was this big kind of sheer face on the backside. it could go up there. Now I'm maybe putting something underneath it, but for me, there's always kind of an initial orientation of a stone. Kind of tells me where it wants to sit, and I'm looking for that. Like I'm looking for, if the side's got more character, more lines, more texture, that kind of thing. I'm looking, how do I take advantage of that? Now, if we're going to do something pretty heavy-handed, and we're going to green a hardscape, I'm open to this big rock. There's a few other, as we start to go down in size, that might be a better kind of main role player. As you can see here, now I've made my life kind of hard. And here too, I'm not pulling from the most minimal pre-selection. And I'm not working with even a huge crate of rocks like you might have back there in the hardscape box. So in this way, I'm really having to look for the relationship. Now see, I'm already kind of, I could do something, but it's kind of a big jump, from taking a rather large leap, which can work. This kinds of things can start to work, but it's getting tricky now. It's going to be something too small over here. These are just the kinds of things as I'm sort of playing with escape. Now this two rocks are too similar in size. And again, this is my subjective opinion, but if I'm going to try and show somebody how to do this, these are the things I'm kind of looking at, even just moving them around a little bit. If I jump down to a smaller size, I start trying to orient something over here, start to find maybe, in other words, in such a small tank with such a big, hefty rock, starts to get a little bit tricky. If I was to fish around in the palette back there, I'm sure I could start to find things to build on that. If this was the only rock I had, we could certainly make something work. What I'm saying, and what I'm sort of inviting you to look at, is having a whole crate, mocking it up first, marking off the dimensions back there with the slats, and really kind of orienting it as much as you can. So we're leaving some space, and we're able to kind of create a composition in there, which in this little tanks can be surprisingly challenging. So, I mean, if someone said, Jeff, this is the 3 rocks you got to make it work, this is something I could potentially live with, but I'm not really overly excited about it. I think our problem is this big guy. So now, given the character of these other stones, little pink chalk still on there. I may just have to spray that off later. Yeah, there's just a lot of great texture in there. So here, just to tell you where the mind working in here, something I'm just going to try. But even as I try it, I'll try and give you a little peep into just kind of like what I'm thinking. But I'm seeing this guy here possibly being kind of a prop for this rock, and I'm seeing kind of this space here where a lot of times this thing's kind of want to start to work themselves. Doesn't always go that way. But usually there's some kind of sense of possibility there. Maybe like to get a little more angle out of it. Now, the reason I'm going to shy away from this is because I'm just getting flat out bored with all this pointy rock going this way and another pointy rock going this way. And, it's cool, but, and it's certainly fine if you like it. Or if you haven't done it, you want to explore that. But hasn't really been, it does come a point when you've seen a lot of that. And there's nothing wrong with copying or anything. None of this that I say is anything more than one man's own subjective opinion, but it kind of makes me want to do something different. remembering that I'm really going to go for more of a greening, I start to just kind of maybe just try some different things. I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing, by the way. It's just totally just happening. You never know. And sometimes the coolest things start to emerge, and it's hard to not be in the way a little bit, just from trying different things. Kind of keeping an eye on the sides. With rock, a little wood touching the glass, not a big deal at all. Often you can even kind of get between it with a little scraper. Rock, I like to keep some space open. Now here, this is two very similar sized rocks, but now I'm starting to think in terms of something that's I'm not following any particular tradition. I'm not referencing in a Japanese aesthetics or anything like that. And so I'm a little more free to just kind of see what happens, where it goes. And really just, I might end up a little pointy here, just for the sake of the time. Some of these things, what I'm loving about this kind of greening concept is it is kind of switching up the rules a little bit, because I'm not trying to make a scene with open space and there's going to be grass growing in it and it's supposed to look like in a monotank, but rather, this can be a sort of a nostalgic reference to any kind of structure in nature. And so here, there's three rocks very similar in shape, but we're kind of orienting them in a different way. Looking for just that point. It wants to tip back. Where does it stop tipping back? This kind of, and I'm going, okay, there's a space in between there. With more time, and if I'm just playing around, it kind of happened in this tank. You get down when you have a chance and look back there. There's a little path, a little cave. It's not obvious from the front, but it's kind of just a little treat when you get up closer on the tank and you see the sand going underneath there. Because as I was just playing around with the stones, I'm peeping, okay, that's kind of neat back there. It's not you would never see it in a photograph if I wanted to, enter a contest with it or something like that. But it's a neat feature because these aquariums are experienced here in person. And if you're designing a tank for a layout contest or something like that, it's beautiful, it's fine. But you may find what works well for this classic framed shot in the front is a little different in person. And some of these things don't always work well when you're in the room. In other words, I would submit to you some of these tanks that have won the big contests and stuff, all of which, are amazing work. And I very more often than not completely acknowledge the sheer talent, the vision, the creativity. However, I will say often when you see that tank, if you can see it in the video later, and you see someone like a sort of human scale next to the tank, it looks like this vast thing, and you read, oh, that's only like a 90 centimeter, a 3-foot tank, but it looks like this huge scene. Well, that's not just the power of a great aquascape, but this is some wonderful photography as well. It's not a photo contest, but let's all admit, if it's a wonderful photo, this is a huge advantage too, right? A wide-angle lens, a lot of depth, this kind of thing. In other words, when you're there with the thing in person, it's a little different experience. I'm not saying it's not amazing, but the thing going, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine from the photo is because often the best aquascapes and contests were made to be in this kind of purpose. That was the output, you might say. So when I'm going to live with a tank in my space, I'm a little more open. I'm kind of maybe looking at things a little differently because I might walk into the room and, quite frankly, like from right here, this is kind of cool. The way this, you kind of have this angle here. You have it's sort of a line happening there. It was relatively easy. It was surprisingly, here we go. All the rules, all bets are off, right? It's three stones that are fundamentally the same size. I didn't expect that to happen. Is it the next award-winning first place global competition? Heck no, but for something cool that's proportionate to the tank, that now we can do this greening and enjoy something really nice that long term we have a cool 3 stones. It's rocks. It might have been a little pricey, but it's rocks. It's not going anywhere. It'll be here longer than you will, I promise. So just for the sake of time, we're going to we'll work this up a little bit. We could keep playing and tweaking and trying different things, and I can already see some of those. It's just getting fidgety and the yawning setting in. I would be yawning too. I get long-winded. I know it's fine. But this is the advantage too. I cannot stress to you enough the value of the small little tidbit chunks is like the coolest thing for kind of just bringing in the texture at the same time. Much, in my view, much harder to get the little pieces where you really want them. Much trickier proposition. So, a little bigger. Now sometimes too, so you have a corner, and there's totally a triangle in this back corner happening from that big stone. And so I'll often, just as a starting place, may not work, but right away I saw this stone, there's a little, I don't know if you can see a little kind of a triangular orientation to that now. So I'm kind of looking at how, let me point that to the back corner, because I'm working in a space that has these defined edges. And this is not going to be the most visible rock, but it's going to start to give us a little more character, a little more depth. It's kind of making this line down. I mean, I looked for you turn it the other way and it's the broadside sticking up. In other words, we're kind of building a little structure there, a little, the lines are kind of wanting to play together. So literally with just a fistful of rocks, generally working from the bigger to the smaller, more or less. Don't want to get overly symmetrical with it or take up too much of your time with my endless doting and da-da-da-da-da with the stones, but sometimes too, that's where a little bit of depth in the sand, you can kind of work a rock down, and a bigger rock just became kind of a smaller rock if you didn't have that perfect warning. You didn't want to get overly balanced. So that rock, you can see it later, is actually not pointing into the corner because I'm trying to throw it off a little bit. And if it's a little too symmetrical back there, some of this I do from the back. Yeah, that's where I'll look for something else that maybe wants to possibly start to kind of maybe stacks back there. Gives a little something to give a little more character than just being a different version on the other side. Literally just trying a rock. It may not be the one. Probably actually isn't. It seems like such a small thing, but priceless. This little stone, as with this thing. Like I'm looking for this kind of little parts like that. Yeah, just because now it's like the lower shelf or whatever the word might be. It wants to tuck up underneath something. And it kind of lets you do that. Just trying it and praying that it works, because these little rocks can start to take all day. But you see how that just kind of, I look for, there's a point and a point, like a puzzle, really. And again, this is the little things, I can flatten it out later, but it's just leaving a little strip of sand in front. It's not quite all the way to the glass. Starts to give me a little detail there. So now what I'm starting to do, because I'm talking and I'm trying not to waste your time, already I'm making too much of a thing around each corner has this little rock coming off of it. So I'm seeing that, many ways to fix it, but I immediately start going, well, I like what those are doing, but how do I kind of maybe shift it or throw them off a little bit? And so we still kind of have this space in the middle here that's kind of crying out for maybe our smallest drops. And that can be a way to kind of throw off this, you can can see it later when you come up maybe, but you know how I'm getting a little carried away with this piece on the corner of the structure.
Too symmetrical.
It's not, yeah,
Yeah.
a little too much balance going on there, but just as a sort of a subtle technique, you can start to kind of throw that off by maybe going in a different direction. Again, this direction a rock kind of wants to point can really shift the emphasis. And you'll find as you put the little rocks around those the three big rocks were fine. You could have made escape around that. But every time you drop a little rock in there, it starts to change just a little bit more. So I might kind of pile them up a little bit here. And this is a case where, again, if I'm working on escape and got some time, I'm going to go. This kind of thing happens all the time too. You bump the rock, it falls over a little bit, it's fine. Put it back. A new thing I've been kind of doing with the stones too is after I get it situated like this, I might take a little bit of super glue, the smallest amount I can use, and then later if you reuse the rocks again and it's crusty on there, a little wire brush is going to get it off of there just fine. But I might go with these little connection points and just in between there with a little bit of the glue, let it set for an hour or so, and it just gives you a little extra stability there. I do it in reef tanks a lot, especially like Nano reef, where you kind of got to pile up a lot of rocks. You got a structure, but one bump and this whole thing is collapsing. So, and then if there's a little crusty after the glue gets wet, this is obviously where you're going to put a little bit of moss. You're going to put some kind of plants there to cover up that line, no big deal. So, in the spirit of just using what I have right here on this piece of styrofoam, you know, you can see how I'm going to break it up a little bit there by just kind of making this little small stone little motif going on here. No clue how that's looking from the front. Yeah, and so there's some funky lines in there. Some you can fix by a little adjustment. Others I'm thinking, okay, weird line. I don't have 100 rocks here to work with. That's where I'm going to I'm going to use a plant to kind of cover that up. Something in me kind of likes this little peephole through the middle, but it's probably going to get a lot of "why did he do that" comments on the internet. So that's another area where this kind of your weird rocks. You know, if I wanted to cover that up, I can just start to kind of play with that, getting something in there. Kind of creates a little block so I don't, if I don't want to have the little hole, it starts to turn this just into a shadow area, or maybe I'm going to come in with some booses right there, for example, because it gets rather shaded. When the light's pulled back, it's real shaded here. Ideal for bucephalandra, which I'm loving and plan to use a lot of. Matter of fact, let me drink the water from here. So yeah, this is where having more than just I made the scape with these 5 stones. It looked cool in the mock-up box, but I'm always encouraging this thing of like a few extra stones, a cup. When you get it home, you start doing it. It always comes together maybe a little bit different, and these little things. You know, it's not a rock that's playing any particular role, and I guess at $8 a pound to cover up a hole, it was a little bit of an overkill, but those are the little things that can get it, you know, just right. So there's some other pretty good little spots in there. I can squeeze some more stones. It's a little tedious. Everybody's been standing here for a bit. We'll skip that and kind of work with it more with the plants. So yeah, totally, this is not working. This thing over here and like this open space over here, no, can't do that. It kind of has me questioning this thing. Down there just right, yeah. Kind of starting to go, you know, I don't know, maybe we'll see how this comes together with plants, and then you can always touch that up, or this is the you come back and you get a few more little pieces and patch these things up when you get home. Ideally, what I would do around here is I would go back and I would pull some different sizes of small stones right down to some little bits. Or if this was all I had at home, I'm going to get a hammer. I'm going to go out in the driveway. I'm going to bust that thing up and have my little bits, something I do all the time. Sometimes I can't find the dang hammer back here. You would think we would have a hammer at all times. And so I've been known to be seen out in the back throwing a rock up in the air as high as I can and letting it bust on the ground. This is it's a little bit of like a gravity. I'm getting carried away, I know, but like I won't. I'm about to go down a path. I won't open that up now. I won't do that.
That is exactly what Sasha does.
You ever take a grinder and shape it out?
I have not ever done that. I haven't. Though I think that's that's crossed my mind. I've thought of it. For me, it's a little bit of a kind of a run and gun style. Believe it or not, there's not a lot of contemplation. I've never been one. I mean, sometimes I have an idea and I'm sort of really dedicated to it, and then it almost never comes together like I was imagining. So the best stuff for me happens, just me personally, is general direction of what I want to do. The philosophy, this is a big picture thing. It's not a super pinpoint finite thing. It's kind of my governing thing I want to do, and then I make it work inside of that. So yeah, we'll do a little bit of planting here. This may turn into something we keep, or maybe not. So I'm going to try and work a few of these in. This is a little bit new to me too. I'm not sure how it's going to go, but let me just make a quick note on the availability from my friends at boostplant.com. Again, these guys are just doing more than anybody, let me just put it like that, more than anybody to push the aquascaping hobby and the availability of great materials in the U.S. And I love these guys, and I really encourage you to support them. So this is a new thing, and this is a big deal. It's a bigger deal than anyone's talking about. Just the plant species itself. I just call it Ricardia. It has a crazy Latin name afterwards. I'm not overly obsessed with knowing the perfect name of everything. Minipelia, it's sometimes called, but sort of less often. I'm calling this the most important plant in aquascaping, maybe ever. And everyone, practically everyone, I'd say 80% of the top award-winning scapes you're seeing in the big contests are very heavy on Ricardia. So when you see that dense green, that's like, oh my gosh, like how did that even, like it looks so aged and it looks so natural, like it's expressing almost like the passage of time in a way inside of the aquarium. It's unreal. They're all very heavy on Ricardia. So it's awesome because it gives us that mossy texture without sort of the burdens of moss. I think the nurseries are finding it a little tricky to grow it because it's just kind of a free forming thing. And they're trying to figure out how do we put this in a format that we can sell. So in the early days, it was just kind of getting traded around, and maybe you might get some from Tom Bar or something like this. But now that it's being offered commercially, I think they're doing the very best they can to grow the plant and put it in a portion that can be sold and shipped and everything else. So I would not consider this perfect, and if you're able to get it from a friend's tank and just have it loose and attach it in your own way, this is ideal. But that's never going to scale, and that's the kind of things that's never going to help bring aquascaping to more and more people, because now if you don't know somebody or happen to have a friend that's got this plant or whatever, like the coolest plants end up being sort of off limits to you. So I'm still kind of exploring different ways to work with this in this, squarish format. It's coming in two different ways. Neither one of them are like what I would sort of call ideal, but because you either have a perfect circle or you've got the little stainless steel mesh there. Now the mesh, it's weird. It's like it's really stuck to the mesh. Like it's not coming off very easily. So if you wanted just little pieces, that would work. But I was so hoping it would just peel off the mesh and we could just glue it wherever we wanted. But alas, that's not happening much with the mesh. And then This other format is on these little, very cool little man-made plug. It has a little hairnet type-ish material over it. Though I was hoping I was going to take off the net and then it was just going to come off in little chunks. No, it doesn't. It's not working that way. It's all kind of stuck. And when I take off the net, a lot of it's kind of coming off with the net. So the point is that we're either looking for ways to have a really good cutters, just wire cutters, and kind of shape this square piece a little bit, because the quality is excellent. I mean, this is coming. This is just a couple days ago shipment from boostplant.com, and perfect health. I mean, beautiful, beautiful Ricardia, better than I've gotten from friends in their tanks before. So, the thing is, as it's going to start to grow out, it's going to take a more naturalistic shape, and we'll be able to kind of shape it a little bit as it grows and gets fuller. So if it's a little odd right now being a perfect square, this is just the state of the aquascaping industry, if you will, right now. It's a relatively new plant on the scene. So the formats are a little limited. So, I'm just kind of bend that thing a little bit and just sort of work it into a spot. And this is all aquascaping, especially at this stage, is a little bit of projecting into the future and imagining what something's going to do as it grows out. But even you can see there, and on the mesh, it's not going to float. So now we're not gluing. If you want to move it around and change it, that's cool. If I'm going to glue it and I have some loose, I like to go around and set it everywhere I want it. I've had there's 50 little pieces of Ricardia or whatever all over the place, and then I start at one end and I just go to the other end. And then I pick it right up where it is, glue right back. When I say glue, super glue, cyanoacrylate. Who knew? Totally safe in an aquarium. You would think you can't put super glue. It's called cyanoacrylate. You can't put that in a fish tank. It's totally fine. They started with the reef guys, the frags, and all this stuff, and then it's made its way into aquascaping, and now some might be getting a little carried away with this glue, but it is a very useful resource. So, but because it's sort of final, once you've glued it there, it's kind of it. I like to get everything kind of laid out, and then I'll go through and do the attaching. So, another cool thing about Ricardia is it's pretty happy in more of a shaded setting. If you kind of looked at how it is in this tank, the light's pushed back, it's kind of sloping off the front rock. Probably some of the healthiest Ricardia that we have in here is the one that's a little out from the light. Not saying it won't grow under bright light, because I had some doing really nice under this T5s, but more that it's cool in this. It's cool growing in a little more shade, or it's undemanding in this sense. So maybe giving these little squares a little bend, a little shape, kind of helps situate them in there, kind of working some together. You can see where there's this greening. It's kind of we're just greening up the rocks. Really, it's not really planting anything. There's no little tweezers and this kind of things. Not to say I won't use them, but yeah. Now, and there would probably come a point that I won't bore you with now, where I'd kind of have my big one set, and then I might peel a little bit off of here and fill in a gap. And this would kind of break up and looking like two squares laying next to each other. So if for now they're kind of overlapping a little bit, it's just to kind of give an impression or an idea. I mean, is it just me, or like something about this green going on that stone all of a sudden is like, it's something. I have to hesitate because I'll digress too much and I'll get all nuts. But there's just a certain nostalgia. It's like there's something familiar there that you can't quite explain it. It's just it feels like a true nature, and you just made it inside the little box,
Like it's been there for a long time.
So I'm giving this a whole lot of thought. This get a little not wanting to stay. It's nothing, a little dab of glue. That'll fix. You get the idea. But how lovely and how simple and not requiring some of this aquascaping. If I may, some of this aquascaping demonstration stuff, I sometimes laugh. I'm like, okay, if you have everything perfect and 6 people just laid out the best stones for you and every plant's prepared and it's all just very wonderful and all this amazing quality and everything's consistent, any one of us could step up and make something completely, oh my gosh, wow. Everybody's gathered around with the pictures and they're going crazy on the Facebook over this thing. These kinds of things to me are just, again, it's just some sand and some rocks and some greening and something is emerging there that's not just a VIP standing in front with things you'll never have doing some aquascaping thing that no one can actually do. Another reason why I'm loving the this kind of attached or epiphytes or something, I don't have to plant it. It's not going to be fussy to grow. I can make something kind of cool with materials that, again, they're not introducing a ton of different variables. So, yeah, there's kind of some spots popping up. I'd like to maybe have a little something here. It's where I might peel a little piece off and glue it there. Don't want to get overly symmetrical. Yeah. See, some of these just need to be cut. Like if I could just cut into a piece, cut this in half, work it in back there.
Very tin snips.
You get tin snips, some kind of good cutters. There you go. Lose yourself in the tool section at Home Depot. Finally, like a really cool format the guys at boostplant.com are doing. It's that same stone, little man-made stone, but with the moss, I think it just works a lot better because now you got a clean, consistent moss. It's not a clump of moss in a bag. So you could easily start to get into making little foregrounds with this stuff or using it in a similar way, texturizing it with the Ricardia. We want to kind of maybe do a little mossy affair there, see that? Gets a little tricky when they're all the same size, and this we can't cut up and whatnot. You start wanting to not make it too symmetrical. I'm just kind of showing you some different things that could work. But what's cool about these is the moss grows off that rock just enough you can pull some strands off and make another little clump, tiniest little drop of super glue, and you can get that in some other kind of weird spots where this big stone's not going to go. It's just kind of getting creative with the material, with the resource. Yeah, I'd probably want another one just to throw it off. I'm super addicted to the Ricardia right now. Not as big of a moss guy in general, but you can see, just to kind of break up the symmetry a little bit, just where that's going. Little guy peeking out back there. I don't know. Sometimes too, you get water in it, and things change a little bit. So it's nice when you can move it if it's not already glued. If I have a second favorite plant in the whole wide world, it's definitely Anubias non-appetite. And I've been buying it for a while from many different sources. And let me just say, hands down again, I know I'm like a Boost Plant fanboy here, but that these guys are bringing this stuff in at this quality and consistency and fullness. I mean, this is aquascaping gold right here. I'm telling you, this is aquascaping gold. Like, this is so awesome. I haven't done it yet, but all we would do is attach a little stone on there. You can get a 50-pound bag of this stuff and share it with all your friends from Landscape Yard. You'll see it now in landscapes all the time, driveways and stuff. They call it Black Star. And Black Star comes in different sizes, but you get this little flat black stones. that are just, it was like they were made for attaching plants to. They're so perfect. I have a lot of it here too. I give you a handfuls, whatever. But it's great because it's got kind of a flat side. It'd just hide in here. You wouldn't even see it. You can glue it, like for the Ricardia bits, you glue it on a black star, and now you got this little sinking thing that is, you don't even see the rock. And here, I'm more inclined to use a wood tie or the twist tie, the brown twist tie material, and have my little stone on there. And it would be the same difference as me just having it loose like this. But, you know, if I wanted to go this direction and start exploring a little bit, you see, who needs a rock back there? This thing. It's, you know, I'm just loving these plants that I can just, you know, work with so easily, and so can you. Because, I mean, this is like, it's already looking like something, you know. Some of these tanks with the stem plants and all the rest, it's immersed plants, etc. It's going to be cool in 6 months, but, you know, we want to enjoy something today. I've never been a good behind the tank scaper, but you get the idea. Relatively simple. There's a rock. Long term, I would do something to stabilize this thing. Have a little rock behind it. Whatever.
Is that the little rock?
It's not happy now. There it is. So lately I set the tank up and then poor Luis Navarro has to do the maintenance on it, and I'm like, don't touch that! You can't bump that one! And he's going mad, and he comes in, oh my gosh, like he's looking at this thing with the branches all over and everything. Oh, why are you doing this to me, man? So, you know, it doesn't have to stay there, but you get the idea and the value. And we did go ahead and attach some of these boosters to stones. I know we're getting as again. I could go on for the next 16 hours. I won't continue to ramble too much, but I mean, my gosh, the quality of these, and there's a good dozen different Bucephalandra species now that all have those same cool characteristics. So, I mean, if we wanted to, we can just start to tuck these things. They're happy to grow any old place. I think the more shade, the better. This is one I've never had. The name is escaping me at the moment, but I can tell you it's lovely. Just lovely.
Is that that mini Catherine, maybe?
I think so. Catherine, this sounds familiar. I'm just terrible at doing this from the back. But you can see we're just bringing in that kind of that third texture. Wouldn't even need many. The Buces, you know, I don't think there's a lot of price gouging going on. They're very slow to grow. So for a nursery to have grown this out this far, there's a lot of time and overhead invested in that. The cool thing is, yes, you might pay 10, 15, 20, 30 bucks for Buces, but they're pretty surefire. And the role that they can play in an aquascape is sort of unmatched. I mean, you can just stick the thing anywhere, and it's just perfectly, well, I say anywhere, anywhere away from the really direct light. But then we always kind of have this need for plants that are going to be happy in more of a shade setting. I'm just kind of throwing these in here. I'm not really spending a lot of time on it. Wouldn't be completely sold on keeping them myself, but just to give you an idea how that just is coming together. See, I love the little style of just, it's just that I'm babbling and throwing things in the tank, and not making any sense, and it's turning into something. And so it's why I'm kind of pushing this as a direction that starts to make a lot of sense for these little tanks. That rock falling over just doesn't even bother me anymore. Sometimes I'm going, you know, maybe it wants to stay that way, but it doesn't. It's terrible. It's not a good idea. I'm telling you, that is something too. I would get back there, I would have a couple extra stones, maybe even just a cheap dark stone, and I would find that spot. This tipping, there's a point at which a stone right there is not moving anymore. and you're not going to see it. It's tucked in the back there. These are all the little things that we could do. So that, in other words, that kind of thing, don't let it discourage you. There's always a fix for it. So, yeah, you get the picture. The cool thing, you can keep playing. There you get some boosters coming in. Add a couple of boosters there. You could do, it's that kind of aquascaping. I think it's just so cool.
Now you say they're slow growers. How are their speed on spreading?
Slow, very slow.
Spread slow too.
Very slow. So think of it, I use this word sometimes as a placeholder. It's kind of a placeholder. It's going to be so long before this thing is grown into some big mat. I'm not really even thinking about that. If it happens and the tank goes that long, great. Any of you have spent any time, multiple visits to this place, no layout really lasts that long around here. Some are ridiculously short, but sometimes standing here is a little spot there.
Now it's the
what board?
first one
Yeah.
you plant at the same speed.
What's that?
The first one you plant at the same speed, the little squares. Is it slow as well?
Very slow. It doesn't really, what's cool about Ricardia? It's not going to take over anything. It's just going to kind of fluff up. It's going to be so gradual. It does start to stick to things over time, but very, very gradual. It's kind of a fluffing up, not so much a growing out or needing trimming, or moss can get downright unruly to deal with after just a few months. So, you guys get the picture there. I mean, there's really no great laboring over that. The power of a cool hardscape and some greening. If I'm thinking nanoscapes, this is just kind of, that's what speaks to me, and I think something that's like we could build a program, a sequence we could follow out of this. So, it's been like an hour now, and if you're sitting on the floor, like in the back, it's, oh my gosh, when is it going to shut up? We're not going to get carried away on this tank, though I kind of like the little motif happening here, and it may be something that I might work it up. This was a stand that was made a little bit not exact right dimensions for the tank, whoopsie. But we can always find a use for these things, and so this kind of extra nano platform may be what this becomes. So here, all I would want to touch on real quick, this was just pulled from the bins back here, nothing special. There's not some magical pieces. That is a private stash that ADG is hoarding all the good stuff. I think you would agree, not too many shops you can walk into with access to a lot of different materials in a volume kind of way. So there's some hoarding, yes, because installing big aquariums is what we do. It's how I feed my family and pay my bills and all the rest. So I do need some good materials that I can't sell that one. I'm sorry, I need that for a project. But I'm really doing a lot to try and make the cool stuff you see on the internet and all this great scapes available to everybody. In this case, I like when I find, like this is 3 different pieces of wood, but I'm trying to kind of create this thing where they all look like they kind of go together. So when I'm back there looking at different pieces, I'm looking for those, again, the similar traits, even with the wood, the same philosophy. Use with the stone or using with the wood doesn't have to go that way, but cube tanks, really popular, so cool, kind of have their own unique aquascaping stuff. And doesn't have to be center oriented, but if you're new to scaping a cube, there is something to kind of this, it wants to orient itself to this kind of centerpiece kind of vibe, almost like a bouquet kind of style. It's something it'll just give you very obvious, easy to follow proportions. And so, this could go together in so many ways, and now it's even kind of work together. It's almost like one piece. I mean, it's pretty solid there, right? Kind of one cool little thing. Again, this was just over here. Anybody can buy it. It's not something special I'm hiding from anybody or any such thing.
Does it float?
This does float, but it sinks very quickly. So quickly, in fact, you could have done your mock-up, okay, you know where you're going, and you can take it home and put it in a bucket of water out on the porch or whatever, and in a few days it's going to sink. You could also take one rock and hold it down in a bucket of water. The holding system back here where we sell fish currently has a lot of new pieces of wood in it. I went through and replaced a lot of the wood. And so I'm telling you from a recent experience of soaking 70 pieces of wood, that most of them were sunk in within about 3 days. So some are still floating 10 days, 2 weeks later. That's the exception. These tend to sink very quickly. So if you don't want the burden of having to weight it down, the spider wood, or what are the different names they're calling it, does sink really quickly. And here, yeah, you can see this was 3 individual pieces. And, you know, I was just after this kind of, not all of them have this. You could go back there and find spider wood of 5, 6, 7, 8 different characters. That this one was a little bit of the wild card, but it had enough of the thin, and then it brought in a little bit of thick. And you could just, I mean, this is just the power of good materials. You can start to just take this so many different ways and do so many different, you know, it's a way, think of it like this, to kind of let the nature kind of creeps in this way. It's not just a man-made thing like, you know, rocks standing up in a soldier row, but, you know, it's that thing. It's like there's a balance there. There's a little composition that has nothing to do with you, quite frankly. This is the beauty of nature orienting itself. And that, I'll kind of leave you with that. In terms of aquascaping philosophy is do not be afraid, and I say be open to letting the nature creep in. Let some things happen by accident. Let something kind of tip over. It might just be so cool. Don't be so, oh, I got to get this just right. Because you could say, I could just sit here and move this around. This could be like a new meditation toy or something. One of these stress ball things or something. You're just moving the wood around. What a great idea. We're kickstarting this thing. Right? You know, and you're just coming up with this different shapes. I mean, this could be oriented into a lot of different layouts. And it's just 3 pieces of wood where I just look for I look for sort of the tie that binds between them. And it could come together even so many different ways in this layout. So that's a little nanoscaping, and hopefully philosophies that go beyond just nanoscaping. And I thank you all very, very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. That was delightful. Hey, honestly, you know, Jeff has an amazing vision. I want to thank you for, you know, presenting to our club.
Thanks for having me, Roy.
Hey, anytime, anytime.